And I mean, I don't know why I'm positive. I don't know why. But what had happened, I think I nearly died that day. I had this savior come out and save me. At 11 o'clock that night, they looked at it and they amputated, and I woke up the next morning, I didn't have a leg. But when I woke up, I sort of thought, well, this is what I've got. I'm alive, and I've got a second chance in life, and let's use it. And I realized, well, if I wanted to be independent, I need to develop another leg that I can actually walk and cycle with. So that was the first challenge. And then the Namibian thing, I always said to you, so I really want to do the Namibian thing because of being isolated. Geez, I can't ask for help. I'm actually forced to be independent. And I don't mind if I sit under a tree and cry for half the day. No one's going to see me while I'm figuring it out, because there is always a way to figure it out.
Welcome to the Seek Travel Ride podcast, where we share the stories and experiences of people who have undertaken amazing adventures by bike. Whether it's crossing state borders, mountain ranges, countries or continents, we want to share that spirit of adventuring on two wheels with our listeners. Hello, I'm your host Bella Malloy, and I'm very excited to introduce my guest for today's episode of Seek Travel Ride, Stephen Drew. Stephen's first experiences of exploring on two wheels were on a motorbike, and it was during one of these tours that he discovered the wondrous open landscapes of Namibia. Such a stark contrast to those he was familiar with at his home in South Africa. Now, it was during a motorbike expedition in 2016 that Stephen was involved in an accident, one which would have life-changing consequences, leading to an above-the-knee amputation of his right leg. Now, I cannot begin to comprehend how an event like this would impact you, both physically and mentally, and the rigorous rehabilitation involved in the recovery process. But Stephen was on a stationary bike 5 weeks post-amputation, and after adjusting to life with a prosthetic leg, he started riding bikes outdoors. Just 8 months later, he participated in a 100-kilometre mountain bike race as a part of a team of 2. More mountain bike races followed, and with each one of the distances becoming ever longer, and the events became more challenging. But Stephen yearned a different type of cycling experience, and it was here that he turned his mind to bikepacking. Memories of that motorcycle journey taken through Namibia sparked an idea in his mind, and he began planning a challenge which he would name his Namibian Ride of Independance. A bikepacking route through the heart of Namibia, one which would see him push his limits, dealing with the challenges of riding in isolated landscapes in extreme heat. I am super excited to speak with Stephen today to learn more about his adventure and how in bikepacking he has found a perfect way to keep exploring the world on two wheels, continuing to push his limits and show himself and others exactly what is possible. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bella. It's great to be here.
I am excited to speak with you, Stephen. I cannot even imagine the stories that you are going to tell me about this journey of yours. But a question which I start my show with, and I ask this of all my guests, is, Stephen, do you remember the very first bike you ever rode?
Very much so. I was 6 years old at the time. It wasn't my own bicycle, but it was really where I had the passion of cycling. I lived in a town called Simonstown. I don't know if you know, it's south of Cape Town, but my house was on the side of the mountain, steep hills sort of going up and down. Obviously, I didn't have my own bicycle, I think, because my mother was a bit scared that I would go hurtling down the mountain. But my brother was 7 years older than me, and he had a bicycle, a blue BSA. And one day I sort of stole this thing out the shed and taught myself how to ride it without anyone knowing about it. My mother was quite a fierce woman. She used to dish out a few smacks every now and then. She was standing in the kitchen. She looked out the back window, and there I came riding this bike down the road. The story goes, which got told for many years afterwards. She sort of opened up the window and leant out and shouted at me, sort of, "What am I doing on the bike? I'm not allowed to ride the bike." Apparently, I looked her straight in the face as I rode next to her and said, "Look, Ma, no hands." And I took my hands right off the steering wheel of the handlebar and I rode past. And this just knocked the socks out of her. And well, that was the first time I actually rode a bicycle. And passion, from there obviously just grew, and I forever wanted a bicycle, but things happened that My father got transferred to a town when he was away from home, so the home life didn't allow for a bicycle. And it was the first time I only got one when I was about 9 years old, a red rally, and obviously the whole life changed after that. But that was my first sort of riding a bicycle.
Oh, I love that. Classic. Look, Mum, no hands. There's some similarities there, Stephen. I grew up with I would say a loving mother, but a very overprotective one who wasn't so keen on me riding bikes outside. I've said this a few episodes, outside what in Australia, what we call the front nature strip, which is like the strip of grass directly in front of your suburban home. I was always a little bit tentative riding with no hands, and funnily enough, I can do it now, but it depends what I'm riding. If I'm riding on a bikepacking or cycle touring expedition and I've got stuff strapped on the front forks or the handlebar roll-on, I find that the no hands isn't necessarily a smart option. But I just love that idea. Look, Mum, no hands. So 9 years old before getting your own bike, and as you say, life's changed ever since. Outdoors and adventures then, did you find as a younger child that there was something inside of you that yearned to explore and discover?
Very much so. In Simonstown, I was to say, we lived up on the mountain. I could walk. I was, 5, 6 years now. We'd go by myself to the beach and play in the boulders. I was always outdoors. We had this dog that used to follow me around, and when my mother wanted me, she used to call the dog, and the dog would say where I was, in a way.
The ultimate snitch.
Yeah. This dog was, wherever I went, this dog, and she knew that I was sort of safe because of the dog. And then when I got my first bicycle, it was before, obviously, mountain biking was even invented, I would say. I would go with my friends and we would explore. And I mean, I think exploring is what it was all about. We used to find, there's a place called Fountains, which was a green belt, and we used to find a path, the little animal tracks, and just disappear for the whole day up this path. I think if my parents had to know what we got up to, they'd cringe. But yeah, we were ever trying to find where this road would go to. I think and it happened from an early age.
And that sort of stayed with you as well, hasn't it? It's one thing to take those mini adventures as a child and follow the path to the unknown, but that has sort of stuck with you a bit as, in your adult life too.
Very much so. Always been inquisitive as to what's down the road. Yeah, and the more extreme it was, the better, as I say. That stayed with me all along. Even, adult life, I would do the same. We would go away and just explore.
Given that zest and that passion for finding out more and exploring and curiosity, did you find that you were naturally planning, holidays and vacations? Were they planned with this idea of finding out more, exploring, checking out more of your radius, learning more about your area?
Obviously, it was the circumstances were around it. As a child, we used to go on exploratory holidays. So we used to, every year, I think as a family, we used to travel a lot to different areas. I was very fortunate that I was subject to different places and I could explore. But I was also allowed to explore. I was given that freedom to be able to do that. And then in my early adult life, very much so, I would spend a month hitchhiking around the whole of South Africa by myself. So I would do that. I did it twice, actually. Early, I'm talking 18, 19 years old. So, yeah, it was always that yearning to find out.
I'd like to then explore a bias that has definitely been pushed my way about South Africa growing up in Australia, and it's this one that it's a very dangerous place. It's only in really getting into the bike adventure space that I drill down and follow people who take tours there and through other areas in Africa as well that I realise actually there's another narrative. But what was it like for you there? And as a South African, is that something that you're aware of? Does it exist? Is it a misnomer? What's your perception of your own country there?
It's really overstated. One thing, we are streetwise in South Africa. We won't go into a crime spot or whatever. But I mean, you get that anywhere in the world. I've been to Brazil, and everyone said about Brazil the same. I mean, I remember going to Rio, and you would say, don't go there. And we used to travel on the little buses and with the locals, and never ever had a problem. I think it's if you're streetwise, but I've never had a problem. Never ever had a problem myself. I mean, I've been to Europe. It was quite funny. As I say, I'll tell you about it when I cycled there. And in Germany, and they came over and stole all off the bicycles of a race that I went to. That hasn't happened in South Africa. All the high-end bikes were parked outside the hotel, and they came and stole 30 of them.
There's your race over before you get to the start line.
Yeah, so South Africa really, especially the rural areas, there's no problem. The people are really great, but there are their hotspots, and Google Maps is a big problem. So, people follow Google, and Google takes you right the way through a hotspot. There is a problem. There's a big unemployment, and I think that's the big, and people are hungry, so they will take an opportunity.
Hey, awesome listeners. Are you loving what you're hearing on Seek Travel Ride? Do you want to keep the good vibes rolling? Then head over to our Buy Me a Coffee page and show your support for the podcast. Just a little virtual caffeine love can keep me brewing up the content which you adore. Click the link in the show notes, buy me a virtual coffee, and let's keep this podcast party going. Thanks, legends. Now back to the episode.
I think something that you mentioned there, which is true of everywhere in the world, is what leads to these things. And it's not necessarily a country per se, it's a circumstance. And those circumstances can be found everywhere. Like I said, I've seen imagery of South Africa, and I've interviewed guests who've gone there and spoken very highly of it as well. And Africa in general, which I feel is something I like focusing on the podcast, because it's a continent that I sadly don't really know much about other than the stereotypes that I grew up with. So I always like exploring those type of topics a little bit further as well. You mentioned there, Stephen, about, going to races in Germany. You were obviously pretty passionate and are still really passionate about riding bikes, and you were racing bikes. You were racing cross country and mountain biking, weren't you?
Yeah, I was racing very much. So obviously not competitively, not professionally, obviously just as an amateur, but I raced, yes, for quite a long time, and quite seriously about it.
What pulled you in that direction from just being a passionate rider to turning up and signing up for events?
I think just wanting more. I mean, I used to be a runner at first. It was my background. I then started cycling from running because I actually got sick and I had to train, and obviously wanted to go harder and harder and harder. I think also cycling, which is different to running, and I think maybe I'm quite better that the more you cycle, the better you get. It's a bit of so you'll do one race and you'll ride, and you'll just get better and better and better. And obviously you just want more. Then there's the competitive spirit that comes in. But I was a better cyclist than runner, so I think that drove me, that I achieved things that I didn't think was possible, and so obviously just wanted more.
Like I said, I imagine your first events may have been taken in South Africa itself, but it was combining that passion, I guess, for riding and being competitive. You were signing up for events in different places in the world as well.
Obviously started just doing races in South Africa. I think I was really a passionate mountain biker. Yeah, we'd read all the mountain biking magazines, and if we had to go to a race, we spend our time in the bike park looking at all the different bicycles rather than like the car park. Yeah, it was just in our blood. We just loved mountain biking. And then obviously you would see the iconic rides throughout the world. We were sort of quite isolated in our youth, and obviously now the world was opened up and there were all these great rides all over the world, and it was just something more to do. So, and I took part in them, but it was a steep learning curve because, as I say, we just an amateur cross-country rider, and then went and took part in these big races that were totally out of my league. But it was really great.
That's something that I love about this side of the sport, is that it's not a closed-door thing. You can get yourself there and you can participate. You don't have to be the elitist of the elite to participate in some of the big events. Like one of the big events we were talking about before we press record, listeners, is Stephen participated in the Trans Alps, and you were part of the first South African team of people to do that?
Yes. In 2002, I was myself and Rolf Lamprecht, a friend of mine. We took part in it, and how we actually came about it, how we decided to do it. Okay, I was at Sabi in the African Championship mountain biking, also just taking part, sort of very amateurish. And there was Marnie Heymans that had won the Trans Alps the year before, was taking part for Namibia. And we were in the campsite. There was a magazine on the table with this Trans Alp and his photo of this race, going through the snow with his bike on his back. Yeah, it looked really dramatic and really beautiful. He came around, and Rolf actually had lived in Germany, so he could speak German, and he said, "What's this race like?" And Marnie turned and said, "Well, no South African has done it. Why don't you guys do it? You You said, do you think we could do it? I said, of course we could do it. That's what's so brilliant about mountain biking. It doesn't matter if the person is winning and the person that's the end. You sort of got the same bond and the same camaraderie. It was quite tricky. Around the campsite, had a bottle of Jack Daniels. I remember it was sort of like, they had half of the back bottle, and the drunken stupid said, put in an email, and before we knew it, we were accepted. And well, we were the first South African team to do the Trans Alps the year later.
Which is quite a big event. And for listeners who've never heard of it, if you've given them an overview, it's not just a little bike ride on a little bit of single track through the Alps. Like, it's quite a big deal, the Trans Alps.
Well, it was the year that it's obviously from Mittenwald to Italy. And I think ours was only 680 kilometers over 8 days. And actually, as stage races now goes, it wasn't, but it was 20,000 meters of climb. And that was the big thing. And then every stage you would have, because you'd go over these ski slopes, you'd have a hiker bike section where you go over the top. So there'd always a section that was synonymous of it, that you'd have this hiker bike that you'd have to run with your bike over this and then come hurtling down the hill on the other side. So it was really, it actually changed my mountain biking forever, that race. That sort of just lifted me to a completely different level.
I have to say, I'm not a fan of hiker bike or on anything. I ride a bike. I like hiking and I like riding. I don't often like combining the two. That's just me. I don't mind it if it's like a few hundred meters, but I'm not the sort of person that would plan a route that would involve a few kilometers of hiking a bike to connect it. Listeners, that may be you, and power to you. I just know that it's not Bella. What about yourself, Stephen? Is that something, and I don't know whether it's ignorant of me, and we'll get into the details of your amputation, but how does hiker biking, is that something that it would put you off if you're planning a bikepacking route, or not at all?
Not at all. I like the point-to-point concept, and that's what the Trans Alps is. It's not, like the Cape Epic now, they go around in circles, which is, to me, it's actually put me off the race. That point-to-point is really great. You're actually getting from point A to point B, and you're hiking a bike because you're following a path that now runs out a little bit. You're not doing it because you want to make the event tough. You're actually doing it because you've got to get to the other side of the mountain. And I think it makes the event. It made that event, I think. I know there were other people, as I said, the Cape Epic, when I did that, they had a hiker bike section because the same organizers came. And everyone complained, I came here to ride my bicycle. I didn't come to carry it, But I think the Trans Alps, because you're getting to the other side of the mountain. And that's the only path. These are these old, established paths that have been there for years and years and years. I mean, a lot of those were like the old Roman paths. It's unbelievable. It's not, the hiker bike sections weren't that long. They were like 3-4 Ks or so. Some of it, obviously, is just too technical. For us, obviously, the pros, they'll ride it, yeah.
Stephen, I mentioned in the introduction, obviously, and we're talking here, you love cycling, you had a passion for mountain biking as well, but motorcycle touring was something that you did quite extensively as well, wasn't it?
Yes, very much so. I really enjoyed it. Sort of gave me that, well, it's obviously being out in the outdoors, and I could cover more distance with it, much, much, much more distance, and carry more stuff with you, in a way. So I really, really enjoyed it. South Africa, I'm sure you would have found out with your podcast, we just got this vast network of dirt roads. It was just endless, endless, endless. You could ride a different road every day and never ride the same road twice. And it's just open for mountain, for motorbike riding. And obviously you can go fast distance, go from coastal regions to desert regions all in the same day. I used to love it.
I often think, and I've had this discussion with motorbike riders, I see so many of them here where I'm based in France, because often where I like to ride bikes is also where they like to ride bikes. We just ride different types of bikes. But I often feel there's that same level of understanding, the being outdoors on a bike and experiencing a place on two wheels. It's different to a person driving a car and experiencing, I think. But obviously, just that idea of travelling on a bicycle, taking a limited amount of stuff with you, more granted on a bike than probably on a bicycle, to explore places, that's obviously something that interested you. And Namibia was somewhere that you adventured with your motorcycle.
Yeah, I ventured with it. I think one of the real reasons why I enjoy bikepacking even more so is that with the motorbike, first of all, you got a helmet on. And I used to always ride with someone else. You have to do it in a motorbike because of the dangers and whatever. And we used to ride very remotely. So you there's no cars. So you tend to be riding in a convoy. You do appreciate the nature and you can look around. I used to ride quite slow. I used to like riding slow. But you don't stop and engage with people. You tend to, because you've got the motorbike in front of you. And it actually used to aggravate me. I wanted to go on my own because I went on quite a few trips. As I said, I went on a motorbike trip to Malawi, for instance. And I liked stopping and engaging with, I don't know, the person on the side of the road. And unfortunately, you can't do it on a motorbike. Whereas with bikepacking, it's the opposite. You're riding so slow that you're just so much more in that environment. And yes, fair enough, a motorbike is better than a car, way better than a car. But I mean, bikepacking is just another level compared to motorbike ride. It's given me that joy back again. And yes, I can't do the distance, but maybe I'll just take longer now.
Can I ask, when you were motorbiking places and you were, say, in Namibia, like you obviously spoke there that the frustration of not being able to experience it fully. Were you taking any bike touring trips on a conventional bike around those times as well? Or was biking for you at that stage, touring trips were taken on the motorcycle and the bicycle was racing and mountain biking and cross country?
Exactly. Yeah, cycling was racing, and the motorbike trips I used to go on about 3 or 4 a year. I only used to do motorbike trips, and I never used to use the motorbike to commute. So the motorbike used to sit in my garage. Actually, I had 2 of them, and I used to only use them for touring. And I used to go on tours about 4 a year, sometimes for like 3-4 days a trip, and then one big trip sort of every year. And it was only for touring, but the rest was the cycling was racing. I mean, it was just focusing on racing and stage racing and that type of thing.
I was just thinking there how you were talking about different distances and, your motorbike tour is 3 or 4 days. Granted, I'm not sure how long that first tour through Namibia was, but your bikepacking trip through Namibia, if I'm correct, was 26 days. So I don't know the difference in distances that you did on one trip to the other, but it is definitely a very much a different experience, isn't it? Because it is just, from a time perspective, you're in the environment experiencing it so much longer.
So I went to Namibia. The first Namibian trip I did, I went on the motorbike. I went all the way up to Swakopmund and then back to Windhoek and back again. So it was a circular route. And I think it was 14 days that I took on the motorbike. And I should have taken 28 days because you were just traveling far too fast to really appreciate Namibia as such. And to do in Namibia on a motorbike, a big motorbike, to do 300 kilometers on a dirt road is a lot of distance. It doesn't sound it. You actually think you can do 600, but because it's so hard going, and it's tiring. Whereas a bicycle, you can do 100.
Yeah, it's even slower still.
Yeah, yes, maybe taking a bit longer. Well, the motorbike riding, as I said, I went up, and then there's a lot of dead ground in between. Nearly the same, but your distance are not really that much different. And it's hard going on a motorbike. Yeah. And it's hot. You're wearing all that protective gear.
Yes. I was just about to say that, Stephen, that I always see motorbike riders in summer where I'm riding a bike and I'm sweating profusely because it's so hot. And I see motorbike riders in like a helmet and full leathers and just think, how hot must that be? Like, granted, you're not physically turning pedals, but you're sitting there with a hot beating sun on you in full leather jacket or something like that. That would just be, ugh.
You get cool when you ride.
It's when you stop.
Yeah, but when you stop, you get hot.
It's the same on a bike, isn't it? It's the same on a bicycle.
Yeah, so in hindsight now that I've actually done bikepacking, I don't know if I would still do that. I just enjoy the bikepacking so much.
It was a motorcycle tour that changed, I guess, the trajectory. Well, it changed your life profoundly because you had an accident. I mentioned it in the introduction. You were on a motorcycle tour. You had a serious accident, obviously led to the loss and an amputation of your right leg. Where were you when that happened?
I went away. It was a 3-day trip. We went, and it would always be in December. I run a factory that has a shutdown over December. And every single time when we have shutdown, my wife works and she's not on leave. So for that week before she goes on leave, I go on a motorbike trip. And it's normally just the guys going away. We leave our cell phones behind. And this time, luckily, I was going to a place called Bathurst, which is sort of up the eastern Cape Coast. We had left from home, gone through a nature park and going towards Bathurst. So we were on a dirt road, but luckily we were about 100 kilometers away from a town, you would say. So luckily I wasn't in the middle of nowhere, but still I was 100 kilometers away. Yeah, I went with this friend of mine that I had been to Namibia with, and I'd done a lot of trips. There was a group of us that used to go. So it was the same person that I'd ridden always, and I'd gone on that same trip to Swartberg with him. And we were riding, and normally what would happen when you ride off-road, you'd also look after the person behind you or the person in front. But when you come to an intersection, when you would stop, because otherwise the person, if you get lost, you got a problem. There's no way of communicating. So I was in front, which normally I don't. I normally always ride at the back. I never ride in front. It's not, but we had somehow swapped positions. And I slowed down and actually stopped. I wasn't riding my motorbike. And he came from the back and, I don't know, in the dust or whatever, then rode and took my leg off as he rode past. So my friend actually took my leg.
Oh my gosh.
So when I was talking about a motorbike, you would say a motorbike accident, you think of a car or down the freeway. But it actually, in fact, it was, you could say, a freak accident, because that's really, he didn't even touch my motorbike. As he went past, we were on BMWs, and there's the pod, I don't know, the pod that sticks out the side.
I'm picturing like the Ewan McGregor, Charlie Borman style bikes now when you're talking about that, because I think they were on BMWs as well.
Exactly the same bike. To tell you the truth, the Ewan McGregor had that red jacket. Well, I had the same jacket. I looked just like
wow, okay. Emulating. Oh my goodness. So that side pack is what clipped your leg?
Yeah, as he came past, I think he might have lost balance or whatever as he rose, because he rose past, knowing the way. And I don't know what, we to this day won't really know what really sort of happened. He said dust, and, I don't know, that there wasn't that much dust. And we'd been riding together for years, so we knew each other. Yeah, and it's just, and luckily, so he took it off. And then there was fate that, obviously my main artery was gone, the leg was nearly gone, and I was lying there sort of bleeding out. And the ambulance that called, and luckily there was a paramedic lady that was somewhere around and heard this. She obviously had the radio and was able to come to my rescue and actually saved me, you would say, from bleeding out.
Because I'm imagining you would have severed like the femoral artery, if that's what we're talking about there. Oh my goodness me.
That was, I want to describe it, but I was lying there and the stuff was like running down the gutter.
I was going to say, were you conscious during all of this? Like, did you lose consciousness? You must have lost consciousness at some point.
I was conscious the whole time. They kept on trying to keep me awake. And I remember going in and out, in and out, in and out. And they kept on putting their fingers in my eyes to keep me awake. And we first had an ambulance there, and it was quite terrible. The guy was trying to take my boot off and my leg, I was like screaming. And anyway, luckily, as I say, this paramedic came and took over. And there were some blanks from getting to the hospital. There's like a little clinic. And this happened about 3:00 in the afternoon, 3:30. I got to the clinic, and they then wanted to fly me to the main hospital, but it was getting too dark, and they couldn't send the chopper in because of the getting dark. So then she had an ambulance, and she volunteered. Well, she said, listen, leave him, you're my patient. And she drove me all the way through in the ambulance to Port Elizabeth.
Wow. Do you still keep in touch with her?
I do. I very much do. She's actually quite sad because she was so good. And then she used to do government work, and she didn't get paid and all sorts of shames. Really sad story. And I think she's in Dubai or one of those places, working in some oil rig as the paramedic there. And she is unbelievably good. She just took over. She knew exactly what to do. Yeah, and I think we got this bond, an incredible bond from a long time, sent messages to each other. She followed my cycle, obviously, since I'm cycling now, so you can imagine how she feels.
Stephen, you very much have taken, you're a living proof of just continuing on with life. Continue to adventure, you continue to push your limits and stuff, and you very much have that mindset and attitude. But I imagine it would not be normal to have started with that attitude. I imagine there is an adjustment process that must take place when you lose a limb like this, unplanned. It was not a planned event. There are people who have lost limbs, sadly, due to cancer, and they're aware that something's going to happen, but something so stark happens so quickly. What was the adjustment and the rehabilitation process for you like in that time?
I've looked into it and I've studied it quite about the differences. And I think the the way I did it is way better than losing it with cancer and things like that. I mean, there's someone in where I live, Neil Stevenson, who lost his leg in a shark attack. So he also had the same setup, and he's also very positive. And I mean, I don't know why I'm positive. I don't know why. But what had happened, I think I nearly died that day. I had this savior come out and save me. At 11 o'clock that night, they looked at it and they amputated, and I woke up the next morning, I didn't have a leg. But when I woke up, I sort of thought, well, this is what I've got. I'm alive, and I've got a second chance in life, and best use it. And I don't know why I've been positive, but I have heard a lot of people, especially with cancer, say when it comes to prosthetics wearing, especially above knee, what I am, a lot of people, I'm surprised, don't take prosthetics because it's such a hard process. And they give up and they end up in wheelchairs. A lot of youngsters that get blood clots or things like that even, or they diabetics, for instance, because then they have a problem with the wound healing and that type of. The amputated was incredible. I was so lucky. The amputated, I'll tell you the story. I was like lying in bed. It started bleeding, but it was because I was trying to exercise in the bed. They wanted to operate again, but they never operated again. I never had any other surgery. It was done right the first time. I was just very, very, very lucky. And I've had no pain. I mean, it was excruciating pain. As I say, they drove me for 3 hours in an ambulance, and every bump I felt it. So that next morning when there was no leg, there was no pain. I don't know if I've broken bones and whatever, bicycle falls and still got shoulder aches, and I don't have a pain where they've cut the leg.
Do you ever get that ghost pain phenomena? I've heard about it where amputees they wake up and it's the limb that's not there anymore is apparently what's hurting. Do you ever have that, or not at all even?
No, I have it quite a lot. It's quite actually funny. I mean, I can tell you now, I feel that my foot, I feel that my socks are sweaty. My toes are sweaty.
My goodness.
It's like
wow.
weird feeling. And every now and then I'd get a cycle and I'd get a calf cramp, and I haven't got a calf there. So it happens. But I think some people really have a problem with it and they take medication. But to me, it's not really an issue. I wake up in the middle of the night. There's these sharp sort of electric shocks, but it's alive, and you can feel it. It's alive, so it's not that bad.
I guess it is worth pointing out. You mentioned it here as well. Your amputation is above the knee, and that is really significant in terms of function and the rehabilitation process, and also how you are able to do things, even the prosthesis itself. Do you want to talk me through that as well?
Yeah. The above knee is very much different to below knee. And I think the first thing is that above knee, your muscle, your quad and your hamstring are all tied to the knee with tendons. And when they amputate those tendons, there are no tendons there. So there's nothing pulling the muscle. And it's incredible. You would have amputated, and I would say 3 weeks later, all of a sudden there was no muscle. It was just a blob of fat. And it happens quickly. Your muscle just disappears, sort of nearly overnight. So that's one of the big differences. So you've got no power, you've got no knee, obviously. Plus side, I haven't got a hamstring, so I don't have tight hamstrings. I can now put my foot right against my face. Actually, I can lift my leg out straight. So there's these party tricks that I do every now and then. But what you have to do, and it's the body. There are different muscles that you've actually got to reactivate to actually use. So you use your hip flexors a lot. You're born with a whole lot of muscles that you use, and you're also born with muscles that you don't use. It's probably how the evolution. And the glute and the muscles in that area are sort of not being used, but it's one of the biggest muscles you've got. Obviously, with the stump, you need to develop those things, especially to start walking. And when you do walk, it's a completely different action to the other leg. So you actually got to train your brain. So when you put my right leg forward, I'm having a different action to my left leg. You're sort of pulling back. When I'm using the leg, I'll pull back. Whereas obviously with the other leg, you're pushing forward and you're using a completely different muscle. The one you're using your quad and the other one you're using your glute. The first thing is you got to change your brain. And for a long time, as I say, when you have that amputation, your brain still thinks you've got a leg. And it still works like you've got a leg and you've actually got it at its time. And I thought when I was in hospital, well, I didn't know any better, very much like you, don't know. I actually thought, well, they'll come in, They'll fit me with a prosthetic leg and I'll practically walk out of hospital there. Everyone, I've seen people walking with legs, they seem to do it quite easy. And those people that are walking with legs, they're fewer than, I think there's more people in wheelchairs than actually having legs, especially above me. And it's a 2-year process. I mean, they say the first year, your stump has to change. You have to lose all the liquid. You've got to train it, so you've got to cone it. It's got to go into a cone shape. And that was really frustrating for me. So, I thought I could just get going. And for 3 months, for instance, the wound is completely healed. It heals very quickly. I don't know, maybe because I was healthy and fit. But as I say, I was on a bike 5 weeks later. There was no bleeding. Everything was healed. The clips came out 2 weeks after the operation. So it heals very, 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 very quickly. But you've got to wait for this process, one for the stump to change and the other one for your mind to change, to sort of change from forgetting you had a leg to really retrain it to use different muscles. And it's to develop those muscles. And the quicker you do it, the better. But it's a 2-year process. So the first year it stabilizes, and then the second year you actually learn it. So it's actually a 2-year process. You go through, they cast sockets. So you'll go through a lot of these sockets until you have one that's now stable. So after 2 years, your stump will most probably be stable. And that was something completely new to me. I didn't realize that it was such a long process. And frustrating because I just wanted to get going.
So hang on, I don't want this to sound really stupid, but were you in a way cycling before you were sort of really walking?
Yes.
Wow.
I didn't cycle outside. So I was sitting at home. First of all, to put in, I run a brick factory. And this happened at the shutdown on the 14th of December. And we reopened on the 9th of January. And on the 9th of January, I was at work on crutches. I made an effort I had a whole people, I was the company, I had the whole factory depending on me, obviously wondering if they lost their jobs or we're going to close the factory. So I had to prove to them that I could be. So I was on crutches. And then obviously there was the way I couldn't drive. There's all those things because it's my right leg, the petrol. So I learned how to drive. I was using my left leg, sort of went through the windscreen for 3 days. Every now I put the foot on the brake, I'd sort of practically go through the windscreen that you learn quickly. So I had to get an automatic car. Anyway, so I was at home sort of fairly just anxious. And a friend of mine, the Sam Willie, the guy that I did the tour, was in a cycling studio. He used to go to a cycling studio twice a week to train on stationary bikes, Coach's Corner, and said, come and sit here on a bike and just come chat to us. And I was obviously feeling a bit down, and that's how I got. And I sat there on a bicycle while they cycled on their little, their sessions that they do. And I then sort of started pedaling, turning the leg around. And I thought, well, if I can do one pedal stroke, I can do 2. Eventually, I was doing 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off. And before I knew it, I was cycling with one leg for an hour. And that was just while I was waiting to actually get, basically for my stump to have the right shape so I can get a leg. And I pushed the process a bit too quickly, which was negative. I wanted a leg, and they kept telling me the actual fact it should be 6 months, but I just wanted it. So it cost me a lot of money because they do it, and before it fits, you now need a new one because the stump has changed.
And so it is very much a case that the stump takes time to stay stabilised in the form that it will stay at forever, or?
Yeah, not really forever. You always say, I would have a new socket now every 2 years. Also, one of the reasons why I wanted to keep fit, what they told me right up front is that you got to try and keep your body weight within about 2%, because if you get fatter or thinner, your stump obviously gets fatter and thinner, and then it doesn't fit in the socket that you've just paid 90,000 Rand for.
Wow.
And obviously then you've also got the stabilizing. So there's these double, you then put socks and you do all sorts of things. So yeah, there was a whole lot of things but that first 2 years, it shrinks a lot, and then it tends to stabilize quite a bit after that.
My mind boggles at that whole adjustment process. There's an element where I've had lots of people reach out to me, and I certainly know this of myself, where cycling has helped me mentally and helps a lot of people get through a lot of things in life. They turn to riding their bikes or going places as part of helping them maintain mental balance. And I imagine through that process, when you were talking about the camaraderie just at the indoor cycling centre that you were training at, that would have helped you immensely there. To sit on a stationary bike 5 weeks post-amputation, to all of a sudden, was it 8 months post-op, you were at a 100-kilometre mountain bike race?
Yeah, they're actually quite strange. I happened to be on that same, and there were obviously the two people there, and I was riding. They were the one leg. But the learning curve was so incredible that I would be, the first time that I tried to put, it was all I was thinking, I was just turning the pedal over. And obviously I didn't have a prosthetic leg. And then after about 3 months, I got a type. I was pushing it. I should have been 6. So they put this thing on. It was a bit too loose. It was a borrowed leg that they gave me just so that I could feel the weight and sort of get the feel of it. It's an incredible adjustment. And obviously I took the springs out of it and started cycling with it. It was incredible. First of all, you have to try and get over the pedal stroke. There's a lot of things that you've got to learn. I mean, you've got to go over the pedal strokes. Every time you put your leg down, you back pedal rather than push it over. But you learn quickly. So you do that for one day, and then eventually you maybe move the seat and you sit a little bit more forward and you sit over the pedal like you would do. And then, I would use the different muscle action, as I told you, the different muscles for the different leg. And eventually I was pedaling, and I was doing a session. I remember starting off, I think the first time I did 16 kilometers in an hour. And within 3 weeks, I ended up doing 30. So that's how quickly the learning curve was. And it was incredibly inspirational for me, that you can come from this bottom base, something that's impossible. And 3 weeks later, you've doubled it. You've actually improved yourself by double. Anyway, so we carried on like that. And eventually there was this cruiser coast, which was 100, from Uniondale to Niles. And I love these points to ride over a mountain sort of to get there. And I joked and said, geez, do you think I can do the cruiser coast? And obviously they didn't want to let me. I think afterwards they said I was crazy, but they didn't want to. They said, yeah, sure, you can. Well, that's what started it. But then it gave me a goal. And eventually I was indoors. And as I said, after about 3 months, I had this leg that I could, and I went outdoors. The first time I went outdoors on a bicycle, I had my wife with me. And she took me to this open. Now, obviously, I've got a balance on this thing. I've learned how to cycle on a stationary bike, but to go from a stationary bike to a real bike, and remember, I can't lift my backside off the seat. So now I've got a bicycle with the seat too high. I've got to put my foot on the ground. So she put me on the bike. I then have to cleat in because your foot has to stay in the cleat. You've got to cleat in tightly on the prosthetic side. I can only put my one foot on the ground, but then I can't even touch the ground. So she held me up we went to this grass patch, obviously a place that if I fell, it wasn't a problem. She held me up and she put me in this direction, and I rode along these little paths, and it was a cow field. So it's all these little tufts of grass, very uneven, and it's all very well for you to ride on. But that first ride I was unbelievable. And I rode, but I then realized, I've got to turn around. And I didn't know how to turn around because I could only go in one direction. And I eventually somehow got my foot out and got down, and I burst into tears. Actually, it was the first time ever that I broke down. And I turned to her and I said, I can't do this. She said, stop moaning. Get on the bike and ride it. And she turned me around and she actually walked back to the car. And that was like the catalytic sort of thing. It just sparked me. And I climbed back on my bike and I rode it. And that was the turning point. But 3 weeks later, I was riding. What I'm saying is the learning curve was so, yeah. And setting goals and setting them, they were achievable. And same, the cruiser coast, I did that on the tandem, as I said. So it was on a tandem bike. Another curveball. So I must tell you.
Were you the pilot or the stoker on the tandem? You at the front or the back?
I'm the stoker. No, I can't be the pilot. And I did that on that tandem. I rode a Cape Epic on that tandem. So it was a massive mountain bike tandem with a 150mm Mavic Triple Crown front shock. So it was a monster
I need to see a photo of this tandem. You need to send me some photos.
I'll send you the photo of us finished. So we go up this Valpad, but it's crowded. About 4,000 people ride this race. So you got the single track going up this mountain, and the trick is to get to the front and the normal. Otherwise, you walk. But we knew we couldn't walk. So anyway, we plotted it. We had people in front of us and people behind. They seated me as to what I was seated before. So I got A-batch seating, even though I only had one leg, which was quite weird because they didn't, they had the seating system. So I'm seated in the front with all the pros. And off we go, and we get 5Ks up this thing, and all of a sudden some guy stops in front of us, and I jump off, and I've got this leg which was I didn't pay for it, it was just a second-hand one that they put together. And I put the foot down, and the leg snaps right off by the kneecap.
Oh my gosh.
So now we're stuck up in this thing with no.
You're legless. Sorry, that's a horrible joke, but like,
I'm legless, yeah. And so we're sitting and you speak about it, and we like say, okay, but now we turn around and there's 4,000 riders still coming up this hill. So we can't go back and try and fix it. And it was broke by the welding. This thing had been welded and what have you. We didn't know what to do. Eventually I had a camelback. We put this leg in the back of my camelback, and the foot is hitting me on the back of the head.
I know this isn't funny, but I'm just thinking of what people behind you who've got no concept of what's happening, and they just see someone with a leg hanging out of their hydration pack.
So we start walking a bit, but I can't walk. I'm hopping, but it's all rocky. I'm walking and I can't walk really. So I eventually said, no. They put me on the bike with my one leg, so now balance. And now there's all these people around pushing, and all of them hold the bike and they push us up this hill. It was about 4Ks. All the people around, it was just unbelievable, the camaraderie. And we sort of, the only one way is to go. So my wife we had to go over this hill, Valpad. So you go over and you come down into a valley, and she used to be there. She was waiting there. It's the only place that you see people. And then after that, you go up the Prince Albert Pass. It's like about a 1,800 meter climb. And I thought, well, I'll get to her and we'll climb in the car and go home. And we rode, and eventually, I started learning I was like a Lister engine. I just had this one leg, and I was going doof, doof, and on the tandem, you don't have to balance. So, and this driver I had, he was a really good pilot. And eventually, we got there to it, and we said, no, well, we're going to carry on. And we actually finished the race, and I finished it. At least they gave her the foot. Descending down, that was so funny, descending, because it was a rocky descent. Every time we went over the little bunny hop, the bloody foot hit me in the back of the head. I got a photo. Anyway, I got a photo of me finishing that race, which I'll send you on the tandem.
Again, Stephen, I'm thinking of guests, and I know I've said it myself, where you're riding, you go, my legs have gone. Like, I need to stop making these little horrible little jokes. But from that, you did continue on with mountain bike racing, and they got progressively longer and harder. But there's something that pulled you to bikepacking, wasn't there? And we sort of talked about this a bit with your bike touring, like, you see more on a bike and, you experience more. So there was obviously the competitive side of you was being fed through the mountain bike races, but there was obviously that other part of your life that you really enjoyed. And bikepacking was the way to sort of get that back, wasn't it?
Very much so. I think when I did the mountain bike racing with the prosthetic leg, I did it really to see what I could do, actually to test the body. No one had ever done it before, as I say, in the world. No one had ever gone that far. So no one could say, what would happen. And as I say, one interesting thing, you get cramps in your legs. You ride long distance, you get cramps and all sorts of things. But in the prosthetic side, there's a steel, doesn't get cramps. So we never knew what you could do. So I, at the beginning, was really testing to see how far I could go.
Can I just say also, and I think the thing to point out here as well is you're also talking about above-the-knee amputation and the prosthetic leg to do that, because we were talking before the show how you had reached out to other above-the-knee amputees who you knew were bike riders and cycled for advice, but they couldn't really give you any sort of advice on cycling with a prosthesis because they weren't doing that. They were cycling without a prosthesis. Is that correct?
Yeah, as I said, in hospital, when I lost my leg, I thought that I would just get a leg and be able to cycle, because I had seen people cycling with prosthesis before, but they're all below knees. They're not above knees. Found out there's a big, big difference, first of all, in the power that you can push out. So then I started reaching out to all over the world, to all Michael Moulton, who's a big Australian medalist and Olympic medalist, and they all ride without legs. The Olympic discipline for my class, if I had to take part in the Paralympics, for instance, they actually ride without legs. The C2 class, you'll see they all do road. There's Darren Hicks, he's an Australian sort of Olympic, and they don't have a leg. They put like the bucket, the socket on the bicycle, and they just go with one. But their races are all road and they're about 50, 60, 70 Ks max. So they're sprints. And there's not a lot of climbing. And obviously, I didn't want to do that. I enjoyed mountain biking. I wanted to be out there. And in the beginning, it was great. I was sort of competitive. So I was always in the front end of the field. And now I was at the back. So there's a different group of people. And the banter and the laughter at the back was really, 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 really great. But all the time, as I said, I did that. I didn't think I'd do that cruise coast, that 100-kilometer thing, with the tandem. When I started it, I didn't think I was going to finish it. And if I didn't finish it, well, I was at the start line, as you say. Being at the start line, you're a winner.
I think so, definitely. That's an achievement.
Yeah, and the next race, I did exactly the same. We developed a leg specially for it. We really started going through the science of it, but it was a 230-kilometer race, never been over 80 Ks. Thought if I got to the first point, which is about 110 Ks, and I climbed in the car, so be it. I've done 110 kilometers more than what I would have done. And we finished it, and that was a real shock. And I finished it being healthy. I think that was the key. I didn't want to break myself. I didn't want to have injuries. The big reason why I was riding with the prosthesis and not without is the imbalance in your body. But as I say, all these other people all rode without because I think it's too difficult in the beginning. And I just by chance, I don't know, by chance, because I didn't know any better. I thought everyone rides with a prosthetic leg. I didn't realize that there were, maybe in the beginning if they told me, well, you could ride with one leg and you could have this bucket on a road bike and go, maybe I would have gone that route. I don't know. But also when I did those races, I went with someone and it did worry me. And I ran out of people, but I went, I had people taking me. So when I did them, I had a partner. He would help me at the water points, would carry the tools. And that really bugged me. I wanted to be independent. I wanted to, I didn't want to have to rely on someone else to basically do that thing. And I think that's what really, I wanted that freedom. So yeah, I took part in races afterwards, but actual fact, I just wanted that freedom rather than that competitiveness of it.
And you'd say you're finding that freedom with bikepacking. You did actually call your bikepacking journey through Namibia your Namibian Ride of Independence. Now, I know you ended up doing that with a friend, Willie, but I can see that yearning and what you're saying there, that it is sort of making sense, that freedom of discovery and stuff. The idea of taking that bikepacking journey through Namibia then, when did that start taking hold and how did that whole trip come to be? How did you start planning for it and how did you start preparing for something to a place that you had toured through before on a motorcycle? So in a way you're aware of the challenges, but on a different, bikepacking is very different to motorbike touring. So talk me through that process.
As I said, I thought Namibia, I wanted a decent challenge. I think that was the first one. I thought if I'm going to be independent, the reason why I wanted independent, I developed a cycling leg that I could only cycle with. I couldn't walk out off the bike, so I could push the bike with a leg. So I couldn't go into shops. I couldn't do anything with it without anyone with me. And I wanted to be totally independent. So that was the thing. So I had a leg and I realized, well, if I wanted to be independent, I need to develop another leg that I can actually walk and cycle with. So that was the first challenge. And then the Namibian thing, I always said, geez, I really want to do the Namibian thing. Because of being isolated, geez, I can't ask for help. I'm actually forced to be independent. And I don't mind if I sit under a tree and cry for half the day. No one's going to see me while I'm figuring it out because there is always a way to figure it out. And I needed that. I needed to sort of figure out how to get over these steps and how to walk up the air. And I mean, sometimes, I used to do fire break. My wife used to take me on the dogs and walk up fire. And it's like, walk up fire break. And then I eventually found it, it's so easy to go up a fire break. You go on your hands and knees. And actually with a prosthetic leg, it actually works very well because you're down on the ground and you push with the leg. And so I used to go like you do when it gets a little bit too steep. You go on your hands and knees. Well, I'll just do it a little bit sooner. So you find a way, whereas first you think, yes, I can't do this. It's like too steep. And that's what I really wanted about the Namibian thing. So I had that in my mind for a long time. I said I wanted to do it alone. And I also wanted to prove, I said my wife had taken me through this whole journey, but she was also very protective of me. After that, I used to go on these motorbike trips, as I've told you, 4 or 5 days, leave the cell phone at home, never phoned her. And that accident really got her because she got that phone call. that I'm lying in hospital.
Yeah, understandable, I can imagine.
Yeah, so I wanted to sort of show to her that in actual fact I don't, because every time when you're with other people, they'll help you. And I'm not saying I'm going to be ungrateful, but one of the things that I had to learn, which was quite incredible in the preparation, I went on a training ride by myself to prepare for this sort of independence. But I went with my old leg, not with the new leg, and I actually learned that it's actually not, this isn't a problem asking for help, and people want to help. I need to get over it, and my wife actually said, don't be shy and ask, so if you can't do something, ask. And that Namibian forced me to actually do that, because the riding the bike was easy. I could do that. It was off the bike issues. The little going to the toilet sounds a stupid thing, but showering. I mean, you showering with one leg, you're hopping and then you go into the shower and it's got this foot thing that you got to jump over, the little shower door.
Yeah.
And wet towels, so you can imagine showering is a challenge.
I thankfully have never had to deal with only having one leg. I've torn ligaments really badly in my ankle before, so I've had the hindsight of knowing what it's like to have one leg sort of out of operation. But it was a mountain biking accident. I broke my elbow once going too slow on the single track, which is not good either. So I had one arm out of action for a while, and I remember it opens your mind up losing, and it was my left arm, and I'm right-handed, so I was thankful for that. But even little things like ripping the toilet paper off a toilet roll with one arm was hard, and all those type of things. So I can only imagine, like you're saying, things that we take for granted and don't even think twice about, like getting in and out of a shower. There's that extra challenge that you've got to work your way through as well. So if we look then at your route through Namibia, your motorcycle tour gave you the insights into what the landscape was like. I'm then imagining, Stephen, that you're piecing together the ways that you're going to make this possible for yourself on a bike tour then. You're thinking, well, these are the challenges I'm facing, and were you just methodically then thinking through, this is how I'm going to get through them?
So the route that I took, I looked at lots of options. On my motorbike trip, when I went up, I went via the canyon side. There's a difference, you can go the coastal route, which a lot of bikepackers actually took sort of very much the route that I took. And I wanted to really go down the center, but there was very few supply point areas. And eventually, anyway, with my research, and because some bikepackers had sort of very much the route, there was quite a bit of information. And I think that's also why I stuck to that route, because, there were a few supply points that I knew, whereas the middle, there was just no information. I mean, no one had gone that route, the way I had ridden my motorbike. So the planning on that side, it took a lot of planning. A lot of it was just winging it. I've learned that you wing a lot of the time. As I said, I wanted to go by myself, and my wife said, it was incredible. I came home with this plan. I planned this thing for months and months without telling anyone. I mean, I had the map. I'd worked the route out. I'd done everything. Then I sort of came and told her, listen, this is what I want to do. And this is the reason why I'm going. She knew why I wanted to do it. I didn't even have to tell her, but she said, but you're not going alone. That was the criteria. And I'm so glad that you did, because, I had a friend that I was there, and he actually could help me. I could ask for help when I needed it. As I said, I think it was a little bit sort of stupid not asking for help. But I mean, I would have done it by myself, but it wouldn't have been the same at all.
There's also, you experience things differently with people as well. And it's come up a couple of times when I've interviewed guests before, that even though you're with someone, you don't have the same experience because you're experiencing things for yourself. You're also on your own in a way. Like, you are riding at your own pace. You're riding your own. It's not like you weren't on a tandem bike, for example. But there's also the benefit of having someone that shares those memories with you as well, which I think when I speak to guests who do a lot of traveling solo, they all, without fault, really enjoy traveling solo. But they all also understand that feeling of, I guess, feeling a certain sense of loneliness, and maybe that's the wrong word, but experiencing something and not having someone there to share that experience with at the time. There's things I can understand with yourself there, Stephen, planning this trip as a way to prove that you can still do this, but also the benefits then, which actually came with actually doing it with a friend. And even, like you said, the lesson you had to learn yourself of swallow that pride. It's actually okay to ask for help.
Yeah, they're very much doing within. We rode actually by ourselves. In the beginning, we rode together, and eventually it just worked out that he rode a different pace to me. I felt more comfortable riding by myself because then I didn't have to keep his pace and he didn't have to keep my pace. And eventually it was actually incredible. We were in our own world and we'd ride for 2.5 hours before we would stop. I'd find him under a tree and he'd sit there just and enjoy it. And so we actually did ride by ourselves in a way, experience a lot of it. But then at night we could sit together and laugh about it and joke about it and strategize together. I think that was also, you share ideas with each other. And this changed my life, but it changed his life big, if not more. I told you that he's just finished the Trans Balkans race. He went and did that race 2 weeks ago.
Huge.
He actually went and did it. You remember, when he finished this thing, he said, "This is it. He just wants more." And he's actually now gone and raced. So he's got that racing thing out of him, but still enjoyed the ride with us. So, yeah.
Well done, Willie. You need to get in touch. I might need to interview you.
Yeah, it was really, really good sharing it. And also with someone like him, that being the person that actually had got me on the bike in the first place, to share it with him and to him to see me actually doing it. I mean, I don't think he could have believed, that we had come that far. And I think, he took a lot of pride, I think.
I was going to say there'd be a shared sense of pride in that as well for different reasons, but I could imagine and the bond that you create from that too. You were mentioning how in the evenings you would strategize together. And, this is part of the problem solving that has to come with bikepacking. But you also said one of the key lessons you learnt is in bikepacking is you need flexibility and understanding that what you might set out to do doesn't marry up with the reality of what you can do. We're not talking about physical legs here and having 2 legs or a prosthetic. I'm more talking about the elements and the road conditions and maybe even mechanicals or sickness. Things happen during a tour. They're bound to, and you have to figure it out, like you say. One of the strategies that you came up there that you needed to come up there was how you would ride through these vast, isolated areas in extreme heat. You were dealing with some quite high temperatures during this trip as well.
Yeah, very much so. We only found out, I would say, after about day 3, when we asked a few locals that it was extreme even for them, that there was a sort of a heat wave that was going through. So it was even worse than what we planned. And we picked it up quite quickly. I also can't take heat. I've tried it. I've trained in it. I mean, I'm born in a hot place, and in Cape Epics and whatever, I've been dehydrated in medical tents more times than always because I just can't take the heat. So, but luckily I knew that, and I could then slow down accordingly and work accordingly to my sort of limitations. So we learned very, very quickly that we would ride early in the morning because it's big sky country. In Namibia, I think that's what brings people there. Those skies, it's clear. The stars, you can't believe it. It's just unbelievable. Can't describe it. You have to sleep outside we put our tent up the first night. After that, we didn't even put the tent up because just sitting there on a ground sheet, there's no humidity. So there's no dampness, there's no wetness, there's no nothing. So you don't have to have a tent.
Literally sleeping under the stars.
Yeah, and so we'd wake up early, leave early, and go as far as we can because that's the best time of the day. And then we found out that we would sit it out in the heat in the middle of the day. We also then found out that the overlanders tend to leave also in the morning. So between 10 and 2 o'clock is when, if you're going to get an overlander come park, that's when they do come park. We would then scrounge water off them because you just can't carry enough water. We also found that you don't drink a lot while you're riding. The problem is when you're actually stopping. So when you're actually having that little sit down, that's when you drink. Or at night, when you stop, you have 2 bottles at night. I mean, you're drinking through the night, replenishing. That's when you actually. So if you're wild camp, you need an extra 5 liters. And we used to stop, and everyone had water. It was incredible. No one rides around there without an extra 5 liters. And we'd inevitably, you get 5 liters of water, we'd share it between us, and that was our night stash until 11 o'clock the next day when we get the next overlander. And it was a way of meeting people. It was really good. Yeah, that was our strategy. Or alternatively, we would, if it fitted in with the resupply point, because that's how it did work, the distances sort of worked out that way, we would stop then and obviously resupply, like in Solitaire, etc. And there were campsites and we would pay for a shower. We'd go and negotiate and have a shower and wash our clothes. And so, yeah, it'd be nice and fresh. So even though we were wild camp for, 3-4 days, we actually every day had a shower. When we came to some kind of campsite, we would shower, put on the wet clothes and carry on again, which was good.
There's something so nice about being able to just splash water on you and be clean after a day of long riding in that type of area as well. Don't get me wrong, I have, and I know there's listeners here who certainly have probably gone days without the shower. But there's just something nice about feeling clean and getting rid of the sweat and not feeling so grotty, isn't there?
Yeah, no, very, very much so. That the first wild camping spot that we camped at, so when we left, our problem when we left Windhoek to Solitaire, there's nothing really in that before you get to Solitaire. Then after Solitaire is where all the tourists go. There are campsites. The first one was a water tank, like a windmill, and that's where we camped. So that was the type of shower or bath. I think I had under a leaking pipe. I sat under this pipe, this sort of shower in the middle of nowhere.
You're not worrying about stepping over into the shower cavity. We're talking about, when we're using the word shower loosely, aren't we? It's literally splashing water on yourself.
So, yeah, that was, but then after that, we had a shower, most times. It was actually quite incredible how we were able to. Also, what I learned about bikepacking compared to racing. Racing, you would race. And when you stop, you get those coffee legs that you talk about. When you start up again, you really feel fatigued. I don't know, bikepacking is different. You would ride, feel fatigued. You would stop, you'd eat, you'd drink. And then when you ride again, you feel like you don't feel any of the problems. I'm saying this is after a few days. It's quite incredible. You didn't get coffee legs. You actually felt rejuvenated.
Do you think that's because what you're doing is sort of energizing you in a way? It takes energy to do what you're doing, but you're taking more in and it's refueling you and your mind mentally in a different way. You're drawing energy from the act of touring?
I think so. I wanted to sort of analyze it. I was trying to figure out afterwards. I think, first of all, you're going into calorie deficit the whole time. You're burning more calories than you can put in. Yeah, and you come to a point that you're exhausted. You'd find this tree and you sit under this tree, you sort of can't go any further. And you'll sit and you'll eat and he had a tub of peanut butter and I had a thing of honey and we'd eat like weird food and have a banana and what have you, drink. As I say, you don't drink a lot on the bike for some unknown reason, but when you're sitting there under a tree, you tend to drink. So you drink a whole bottle, maybe have a rehydrate or whatever. And when you get up after half an hour, you feel totally like you started in the morning again. And it was something that bugged me because I used to know before in my racing days, didn't want to even spend a lot of time at the watering point. So I think about the stage race because you got that sort of really lethargic feeling when you start up again. But bikepacking, I found the opposite. So when you are tired, I actually felt that you must stop before you really over the edge and replenish yourself because you will feel better. And knowing that when we also get to a town and you think, well, I'm finished for the day, and half an hour later, after having a shower and whatnot, you feel, geez, I want to climb on the bike again, carry on.
It reminds me, actually, there was a quote that I came across of yours, Stephen, which I want to read out, and it was, your body changes and you get into a rhythm. Then you're surprised by what you can actually do. You unclutter your brain. We weren't watching TV or drinking wine in the evening. Our minds were completely different and we felt really good. It's a different mindset that you go into and you're doing different activities and yet you're still drawing energy and seeing what's possible for you to do this day in, day out.
Very much so. You just, it's like a Zen sort of moment. You rejuvenate your soul, everything. Your mind is, I think a lot of it is mental, as you say. You just sort of really, your mind is, you're just in a good place, a really, really good place. You're also healthy. You haven't got no toxins in your system. What you eat just burns. I mean, there were some stages I don't eat, I'm not a sweet person. I don't eat chocolates or whatever. I mean, I was having 9, 10 Snicker bars a day. I mean, it's unbelievable it was just, and that was from Willie. He kept on feeding me then after a while. Geez, that's what I was fueling myself on. So your body just eats the stuff and you just go to a different level. It's an incredible feeling, I found. And I think also with my leg, that's one thing. I burn much higher. My heart rate is much higher. So when I'm climbing, I'm working at a much higher intensity. I think I'm burning quite a lot of calories, more. And so I need to put it in. And I've got a big appetite. So
I don't want this to sound like a really stupid, ignorant question, but you were talking before about you had to make sure that your body weight stays within 2%. It doesn't change too much. you're doing something physical where you're calorie depleted day after day. After 26 days, I don't know how to say this without sounding stupid, but did your leg fit properly? Like, had you lost weight and your leg wasn't fitting quite well?
Very good question. That was one of the interesting things in the development of my leg. The first leg and what have you, that was a problem. So how we overcame it, I fitted a boa, like you have on your shoes.
Yeah.
There's a company called Clicks Medical in Steamboat Springs. They make these things for prosthetic. It's a boa. And so I have my cycling leg is a pin lock, where my walking one is a vacuum. It's the vacuum sucks it. So when you lose volume, you lose vacuum. And I've got the pin lock. But also your leg in the cycling position, the muscles are completely different to when you're walking. So when you're walking, the fat pushes and it cones up. But in the cycling, you don't cone, you're straight. So you actually, problem with cyclists when they cycle with the normal leg is that your leg is always a bit loose. So what I did is I fit this boa and I'm able to tighten it. And the more volume I lose, I tighten it as I go. And it's like tightening up for a sprint. So I use that to compensate for the volume losses. And that was something that we developed like early on. And I also had, before when I didn't have the bow, you have like a bending motion. So when you're pushing down on your stump, you'd have this, because it's a carbon socket, it'll push in on the top and it'll chafe you on the top of the stump because it's bent. So now with the bow, I'll push it on the bottom and it keeps it straight. So I don't have any chafing. So those are like the little things that we developed.
Solutions that you've come up with.
And it's a simple solution. I mean, a boa is such a simple. What's also nice about it, when you have a cycling leg, you don't have to replace the socket all the time. So you can, where a normal walking leg, as I said, you got this cost that I've got to keep on replacing the socket because as my stump gets bigger and smaller. With a cycling leg, they have these legs that cost a lot of money and they say they can be for cycling, but in actual fact, you want the cheapest possible leg make. All you want is a hinge. Yeah. And the socket with this bow so that you can actually make it bigger or smaller as you fit it in. So I didn't have that problem. I just tightened the bow down.
I imagine, Stephen, you've got so many amazing memories from this experience that you took. 26 days through Namibia, sleeping under those amazingly brilliant night skies, the stars you would have seen. I'm sure you watched satellites. I'm picturing big sky Namibia. I live for those natural moments, for those amazing sunrises and sunsets. And when you're camping, your body seems to get into the rhythm with the sun and watching that sort of transition of night and day over and over again. I'd like you to take us there for a day of your journey and fill me and the listeners in on what it was like on one day on this trip. It can be any day you choose from. Anything could happen. And I just want you to recall those experiences for us now. Go into the memory bank and share one day of your trip.
Okay, there are so many. Especially you speak about the sleeping under the star, but was really, I think, my favorite. But I think one of the most interesting days was the day after the castle episode, which you remember we spoke about.
We have, and I'll just say quickly, listeners, if you think Stephen sounds familiar and this story is a bit familiar, it is because Stephen has shared a day of his trip before, which we have featured in our mini midweek Cycle Shorts episodes. And you definitely want to hear about that day. It sounds like he's telling us about something different now, so go ahead.
So, okay, after the castle, we were at this castle for 2 days. Willie was getting better on drips and hadn't eaten for 2 days. But as I said, that night, early in the morning, I'd eaten, I think, too rich food, but in the middle of the night, I got violently sick myself. And I brought up and my stomach went. And I didn't know, obviously, seeing Willie, what he did, I didn't know if I got the same bug. Turned out it was just too rich food, actually. But in the morning, we left early before the same setup. We wanted to leave in the dark. That was our strategy. So it was before breakfast. The castle people came there and gave us a little pack of breakfast pack. And obviously, I couldn't eat this at all. It was just terrible. And Willie had just started eating, and we set off on the road. And in that area, in Sausage Flay area, there is nothing. There's not a blade of grass. There's not a tree. But it is beautiful. It is unbelievable. The sun just comes and just the colors of those dunes was just unbelievable. And we cycled, and we still had to go to Beta. So it was about 120 kilometers that we had to do that day, which was quite a heavy day after being sick. And I really didn't feel good, so I could only eat the fruit in the bag. I didn't want to eat anything, so I was really worried about myself, not really telling Willie that much. We went down the road, went past the same machine that I slept under, and we found out, in actual fact, the reason why the machine was there because they were repairing the road. And there was a 15-kilometer detour through the desert, a sand road.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so we're not feeling well. The roads are flat, but they're sandy, and it is just unbelievable. You just go, it's like a false flat. You're no freewheeling. You just got to pedal all the time. Anyway, we rode, and eventually we got to the stage, the 10:30 in the day, 11 o'clock, when it started getting over 40 degrees, we were hot. We'd only gone 40 kilometers. I mean, it was terrible. And we sat on the side of the road there was a signpost, only a little signpost, and we tried to get the shade under the signpost, and we was leaning up against it thinking, what are we going to do now? Quite funny, one overlander came from the front and said, water. And they gave us a 5-liter water, but with about half a liter of water in the bottom. They gave us this big jug in the middle of the desert, and now we had the water, but now we didn't know what to do with the plastic container. We had to stop luckily another car came, we gave them the container. And we really just thought, well, we can't make it, we're going to die out, yeah? And we looked behind us, and there was a house in the distance, and we thought, well, let's go to this house and try and see what maybe we just want shelter, we want shade, because there was no shade. So we cycled along the sandy path to this house, and we didn't know, but it actually was the owners of the nature reserve. They owned it and was their training center. And we got there, and there was this little old German lady that came out with her son, sort of very rude. What do you want? And that's, I think, when my leg does come in handy occasionally, because they were really rude to old Willie. And then when she saw me, she sort of like buckled a bit, and we said, all we really want, we want a bit of shade. We've been sick. She said, sick, I've got a new farm manager who's got a baby, and I can't have them being sick, so you actually can't come here if you're sick. And she was quite strange. So eventually they gave us a little place that we could, under a concrete slab, under an awning next to the building, and we sat there, lay on this concrete. And the son came over, and he eventually started talking to us, being very nice, and he gave me some water. And the water in Namibia, there's one thing, it's all bore water, and anyone is going through the buy bottled water, because the normal water just makes you feel, if you drink water that doesn't taste nice, then you don't feel like drinking.
Yeah, I mean, it's better than nothing, but yeah, I totally get that.
Anyway, he gave us a tub of water, and it just tasted like honey. It was the best water I've ever had. And he then proud to say that, no, his well there is the best water, and he had tested it in Germany, and it was one of the top. It just so happens that they own the place, and they only come out for 7 days a year, and they happened to be there when we got there. And obviously they're still in European mode. Okay, so anyway, so we lay there, and he gave us the water, and then eventually we said, sick, and it was hot, and he then said, no, he brought me some green teas for my stomach. He's brought me this concoction of green tea, which was really nice, man. And I took my leg off. I couldn't worry about it. I just laid next to me, and he was talking to us, and the next minute, I don't know, I passed out. So did Willie, and I remember waking up with this noise next to me, and it was Willie who was snoring. We fell asleep. 2.5 hours, while he was talking to us, we just passed out, both of us, on his veranda. That's what we only found out afterwards. I looked at it, just 2.5 hours. Willie never snores, but he was snoring like a trooper. And it was incredible. And we then ate, and this farmer, the new farm manager that this lady was really worried about, we're going to make sick, came, and he was Namibian, and he was as friendly as can be. And we obviously ate and drank, obviously, this nice, beautiful honey water. And he said, no, well, he's got someone that's going to go up the road about 15 kilometers to some farm up the road. Do we want to lift it? We were in the van, and it was incredible. It was like, we were like just different people. We climbed on their bike. Our bodies had obviously just shut down and regrouped ourselves. We drank, and we made it to better that night. And from that day, it was just, we just went forward every single day. It was incredible. We really hit our bottom. But I mean, this guy, we actually told us, laughed at him. We laughed. He said, he was talking to us, and the next minute he was just speaking to no one. We were both passed out.
Both asleep. I wonder if you were snoring too.
I don't know.
It sounds like your body's did that whole turn it off, turn it on again. It's like a system
Yeah.
reset, and then you were good to go. But I love so much about that. The serendipity of the fact that they're only there 7 days a year and they happen to be there. There could have been no one there, and then who knows what would have occurred. Like you said at the start, somehow you figure things out. There's always a way. You figure things out. I think that it was fate that they were meant to be there as well. But I absolutely love it. I mean, you finished that trip. You must have felt so immensely happy and proud at finishing a journey you had planned for so long. Often there's a bittersweet feel that goes ahead with that. You sort of don't want a journey like that to ever end when it comes to a completion point. But certainly your adventures bikepacking are not ending because you're currently planning your next big adventure, aren't you?
Yeah. When I finished that, I'll never forget halfway what we came across some farmers in Lourisfontein. We were sitting on the side of the road, and these farmers had a comment to us. They looked at us and said, I suppose when you're going to throw your bicycle away and you're never going to ride it again. And we looked at him and I said, more the opposite. I'm now going to really start riding it because I now know I can do it. Yeah, there's a lot of things I learned that I didn't think I could do. A lot of things also that I find difficult, which I didn't know I would find difficult. Like putting up a tent, to be honest with you, was difficult. So that's why even with Willie, I would wash the clothes and he'd put the tent up. It was just we dovetail that way. But anyway, when I finished, we said definitely, this is when it's going to start. So he's done his Balkans ride, and I'm now going to go on the 10th of August. I'm driving up to Victoria Falls, and I'm going to be with 2 other people, actually, which I've done a bikepacking trip with before. So I know them quite well. And we're going to we're going to go down the Zambezi River in Zimbabwe, and we're going to go all the way to the end of Kariba Dam, go over the dam wall and try and come back through Zambia, back to Victoria Falls through Livingston. It's 1,400 kilometers. And I haven't told you, but I've done research, and I've exactly the same. Found everyone did. When the Zambian side, they said it hasn't been done before. I mean, even there's certain sections that we're having to change because they said it's impossible. You can't go through it. There's one section that there's this guy that I've got hold of, and I'm worried about wild animals. And he said, no problem. The wild animals on the Zambian side, I think they're poached, and they're obviously. But then I only realized he actually owns a crocodile farm, so it's probably coming from him.
It's like an Aussie saying, don't worry, the animals are fine.
Anyway, he's helped us so much that we want to go all the way along the dam, and there's about 40 kilometers of thick sand that we've got to go through. So, and the same, you said the mindset, and he said, about 40. I said, well, let's be honest, if we do it in 2 days, that's what we'll do it in. If you have to push our bike, it's only that 40 kilometers, and then after that, it's possible. Yeah, I'm doing that. I'm hoping to take about 18 days. The Zimbabwean side I've done, why I want to do this route is that in 2010 I did it on my motorbike trip. So I went up to Malawi, and we, by chance, changed our route, and I rode that route on a motorbike. It took me 2 days, had to wild camp, engage with the locals. There's a local community there called the Tsonga, which are the most humble, nicest people. Shame, to their detriment, they've been abused throughout their whole life, been pushed around. But now I can actually go and really engage with them. I won't be on a motorbike with a helmet around my head. I'm hoping, who knows, that was 210, and maybe it won't be the same, but that's what I'm hoping to really get that African experience. Where Namibia is brilliant. You get the big sky, no people. Obviously, Africa is a different, and you've got villages, things like that.
It'll be a very different experience. I'm definitely looking forward to watching it all unfold. And I'm sure, Stephen, people are listening thinking, how will they be able to watch this unfold? If people do want to learn more about this and follow your adventures, is there a way that they can do so? Can they follow you somewhere?
My Instagram, it's Stephen F. Drew. That's about, say, the best way. I only really post when I do trips and that type of thing. I'm not one that really posts a lot, but yes, I will. And I do put it out on there or on Facebook. On Stephen Drew, you can look at me there. But that's it. I will post. Especially this one, I think, I've got myself like a little tripod. I really want to share this experience. I think that's one thing with the Namibian. I'm so privileged to actually do these things, and sharing them was needed so that other people aren't privileged to actually go to those places can actually share with them. And there's a lot of points on this area. The tourism there is really being deprived, especially since COVID in that area. In Zimbabwe and Zambia, it's like poverty. And hopefully, if I can help in some kind of way just by sharing, my experiences in the little resorts, that's what I'd like to do also.
Fantastic. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to following you along, and I'm sure our listeners will as well. And listeners, I'll put links to the way that you can follow Stephen in the show notes so that you can keep track of this next journey, which sounds incredible. Stephen, as I look to wrap the show up, there's 3 questions which I finish off with and ask all of my guests. The first one is you get to now have a song added to the Seek Travel Ride music playlist, available now on Spotify and Apple Music. What song, Stephen, would you pick to be the soundtrack to your adventures?
I had to think. I really love music, if I could just say, and there's lots of different songs, but I think especially from the Zimbabwean one, there's a song called Say Africa by Vusi Mososela. It was actually a song that was around in the 2010 World Cup, and it just really epitomizes what Africa.
I wonder if I've heard it during the World Cup, and I'm not sure if I know the song or not. I will definitely have to get you to send me a link so that I make sure I put the right one in, but I'm already excited to listen to it.
Actually not written by him per se. They credit it to him, but it's written by someone else, but he's the one that made it sort of famous from the World Cup. And it's the rhythm in my feet and the dust in my shoes. Yeah, so it's all about, it's about the people of Africa. And I think that's really what I'm also trying to get. We spoke about the crime and the what have you, and everyone says, and Africa, especially that area, I will go through there, there'll be no begging, nothing. The people don't beg. Incredible. Your perception, you think that you would have, especially in those areas. They just want education, they want to learn. Yeah, and I think on a bicycle to experience that will be even better, so.
Definitely. Oh, I'm looking forward to learning more about this journey as it unfolds for you. Okay, final 2 questions. Stephen, you have a choice to make one day. You can decide to pedal your bike up a constant, never-ending hill climb, or alternatively choose to pedal on the flats but into a constant headwind. Which one are you going to choose?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. Obviously, everyone says the headwind is just terrible, and especially with me with the leg, it's just unbalanced. But sometimes the never-ending climb is impossible. So at least the headwind is terrible, it's horrible, but it's achievable. Whereas sometimes the climb, remember, I can't sit out of the seat. I can't lift my bum off the seat. So you can imagine climbing for 2 hours, and then if I stop, I can't really go because I've got to push on my one foot and then sleep in and then lift the seat. So I would rather do the climb 100%, especially now with my new leg. I love this new leg because I can actually climb off and walk next to the bike with the other one. So it's a toss, I would definitely want the climb, I would say. But obviously, if it's really, really, really steep, maybe necessity might.
So I could be mean and say it's a really steep climb just to push you into Team Headwind, with which you would be a rare gem and a rare few.
Well, I know you don't get many headwind people.
There aren't. I feel I need to change these questions. There's part of me that wants to choose new questions, and then part of me thinks, no, I've got to keep it consistent. So you know what, listeners, get in touch with me. Find me on Instagram, send me a message, and let me know. Do you want me to change these questions up, or should we stick consistency? All right, speaking of questions, one final one here for us both to listen to your answer to on Stephen, and this will be an interesting one. You have a choice one day. You can ride your bike only for 4 hours, but you can choose whether to ride for 4 hours on your own or 4 hours with other people. Which one are you going to choose?
I think on my own, only because I ride at a completely different pace to other people. I ride fast on the flats and slow on the climbs, and it sometimes irritates people and me. So I love people. I'm a people's person. I like people around. I'd rather have, but when I'm riding, actual fact, I think I feel more comfortable by myself.
On your own. Okay, so potentially into a headwind instead of a really steep hill climb on your own. That's where we will put you. But really, when I think of you, Stephen, I'm now thinking of you just exploring true Africa and just being in your flow state and in your element, because that's what this whole interview with you has really given to me. That's what has come across from everything that you've shared. Stephen Drew, it has been an absolute pleasure listening to your stories and experiences. I have learnt so much. I realised prior to this just the ignorance that I had of just totally oblivious to what it must be like as an above-the-knee amputee. But also, what I really love is that you just exude this positivity. You exude this energy of, as you said, just living, just doing and seeing what's possible, constantly pushing the boundaries and also reclaiming your purpose in life and what you enjoyed. The idea of taking tours, of exploring, taking that independence tour, seeing what was possible and now planning even bigger and better ones. I'm so glad to have come across your story. It has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your story and experiences here on the show for Seek Travel Ride.
Thanks.
Listeners, I don't know about you, but I am super energized having just finished my conversation there with Stephen. Hearing about his journey with a bicycle from, being a young child, 9 years of age, sneaking out, discovering those paths, it's almost like he's taken this journey back to looking to go down the road less travelled. That life-changing event of his, losing that right leg, and then still just going through the process of life is for living and seeing what's possible. That was really what came across there for me. And there was a quote which Stephen used to describe preparing for his bikepacking journey through Namibia, and it was, "There is always a way to figure it out." It's a theme that's come up with other guests, and it was really interesting to hear Stephen talk about that. It really sounds to me like he's no longer looking at problems as being a big, sharp wall that he's butting his head against. He's always looking at there's always a way to figure it out. If the adventure is there and he's yearning it enough, there is a way that he can make it possible. I'm certainly looking forward to his next adventure unfolding and will be keeping an eye out for that as well. Now, if you are enjoying listening to Seek Travel Ride and you want to see a little bit more behind the scenes of what's happening on the show, guests that are coming up, and also highlighting what's happening in the community, then definitely make sure that you are signed up to the Seek Travel Ride newsletter. I send the newsletter out every month, and in that I share exactly that. Who are the people that are coming up on the show? Some more photos, some more insights and information that we can share to you that I can't quite capture in each of the weekly episodes. And it's also a pleasure to be able to share news from the community as well as information about how you can also get involved with the podcast. You'll find a sign-up link to the Seek Travel Ride newsletter in the show notes. Click on that, sign up, and you can look forward to monthly Seek Travel Ride news hitting your inbox. Until the next episode, I'm Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening.